Hello everybody, as promised, here is the video of the basic sleeve draft for beginners. In this video, I'm just going to be showing you one way to draft a basic sleeve that you can make all other sleeves from. This is of course drafted using numbers. Remember, pattern drafting is from pattern drafted from measurement, and pattern making is using any other pattern to make a pattern from. All right, so let's get started. I have all my tools in place as usual, the regular things I would basically need, and I have my workspace prepared. Okay, so I've already got my measurements and from size 8 model, and just like the first 3 pieces, the front bodice, the first 2 pieces, the front bodice and the back bodice, I took the measurements, did the math, and added the ease, and drafted the front and back bodice first, which is the idea because you need to already have those 2 patterns drafted. It makes it easier when you're drafting the sleeve if you have those already in place. Okay, so once you learn how to draft a sleeve pattern, it shouldn't take you any longer than about maybe 10 minutes to draft it. So let's get started. All right. Okay, so some of it I've already done, but I'm going to go over what I've done. If you're trying to find out how much paper you need, how long you need the paper to be, or how wide you need the paper to be, first of all, the paper needs to just be wide, as a little bit wider, 3 or 4 inches of extra paper than your bicep, than the widest part of your draft, which would be in this case be the biceps. Okay, and then the length of the paper is going to depend on the sleeve length. Okay, and then you want to have some left over. So what I did is, the first thing I did was, after I got my paper, I folded my paper in half, okay, down the middle, and then I opened it up and I put my guideline across the top of the page. So this actually represents my shoulder tip. So this is the top of my paper. Now, and then the sleeve is a pattern that has a front and a back, but it's only one pattern piece. Okay, and so when you draft it, unlike the front and back bodice, you draft this pattern all at one time. Okay. All right. Okay, so the sleeve has a front and a back. The front sleeve, like the front armhole on the bodice, is a little bit different than the back because, again, we as women, we have curve in the front. We have a bust in the front. All right. So this line at the top represents the top of my draft. And after I squared a line across here, then I found the center, labeled it A, and squared a line down to represent my sleeve length. My sleeve length for this pattern was 21 and a half and 21 in a fourth. So I have found the middle and squared a line straight down to the bottom here, and this represents my wrist. Okay. So the next step would be to come back up here to my point A, and on my center line here, square a line down that is equal to my sleeve cap measurement, my cap height. Okay, your cap height represents from your shoulder tip down to the widest part of your arm, your bicep. Okay, and so here I've measured down, it was 5.5, and I've marked it here. Okay, once I do that, then on this same line I measure from that point at the bicep down to the wrist here and find the halfway point. When I find that halfway point, I mark it, and then I measure down 3/4 of an inch here, and this represents the elbow line. So after I do that, then I go back here, and just when you're starting drafting patterns, label all of your lines as you work so that you don't get confused. So we know this is where the top, so this would be the shoulder tip. This represents the bicep. Okay, this represents the elbow, and then this represents the wrist. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to divide our bicep measurement around the widest part of the top of your arm, measure it, divide that measurement by 2, and add some ease to it. In this case, I added 1/4 of an inch ease to it. I divided it by 2 and added 1/4 of an inch ease, and from this point in the center, I measured out that amount and marked it here, and that same amount on this side. Okay, so this is my front, this is my back. So this is half of my bicep here and half here. All right, then I came down all the way down to my wrist, and I measured from this center line out to what would be equal to my bicep, but I subtracted 2. So then if this was 6 inches, then when I got down here, I would start here and measure over only 4 inches, okay, and mark it, and 4 inches on this side. All right, so my wrist, half of my wrist is 2 inches shorter than half of my bicep. Okay, so I marked that here and I marked that here, and then I connected these lines on both sides. All right, okay, the next thing I did was to take my ruler and connect my shoulder tip to my bicep line. Okay, once I did that, I connected it there, went on this side and connected it here as well. So this is the back sleeve. Again, it's different from the front, and when we're trying to make that sleeve shape, this is how we make that shape. Okay, so we divide this measurement, okay, into 4, and we mark the points here. So we measure from here to here and divide it by 4, mark it on the line. The first measurement, we measure out 5/8 of an inch and mark it. The next one, we measure out 1/4 of an inch. The next one, we measure in 3/8 of an inch on the back. All right, so what we're doing now is just preparing to draw that nice curved shape you see on a sleeve. Then on the front of the pattern, we take this same measurement, divide it by 4, but we measure out differently. So we measure out 3/4 of an inch and mark it there. Here we mark out 3/16, and then when we get here, the final one, we measure in 1/2 inch. Okay, and mark it. All right. Once we do that, we're ready to draw in that armhole. So some people like to immediately start to use their curve. I like to draw it in by hand and then go back and make it nice with my curved ruler. So the main goal here is to come from up here and touch that line, start moving in here, touch that line, okay, and then keep going and go in and catch this line, and then go ahead and land on this page, land on this line, I'm sorry. Okay, so now that I've got the shape I want to have, then I'm just gonna come here and use my ruler to true it, to make it nice. Okay, and when you're doing this, you can use both sides of your ruler. So like when I get here, I'm coming in here, and I had to turn my ruler over to the back side of it. Pull my paper down some so you can see Okay, and then I'm just going to use the back of my ruler here to make a nice curve. Now I have to land on this bicep line because that's how the sleeve is shaped. Okay, and I have to make sure I go in here. So remember, your rulers are just tools to help you finalize your draft. Okay, so you use the tools accordingly. So there's my back sleeve there. Okay. All right, so in the front, same thing. So I'm going to come out here. Okay, come here. And then I'm coming in a 1/2 inch here, and I'm headed back out here. Okay, so now I'm going to use my ruler, curved ruler, to go ahead and make that nice and shapely like it should be. Okay. All right. And then I'll flip it over to the other side. And I'll come in like this. And so just remember, your ruler needs to sit on this line here. Okay? So when you're doing this, make sure your ruler, you end up with that curve here. Okay? All right. So now I have my front and back. This is the front, and I have the back, and I have that nice curve we like to have. So I went ahead and I connected the lines once I had my measurements taken here. So remember, this represents 1/2 of the bicep here, 1/2 of the bicep here, plus a 1/4 inch ease. Then I came down to the wrist and measured out 1/2 of the bicep, but I subtracted 2 more inches from it, and that made me land here. Okay. All right. So, and then I went and I connected these lines. Okay. All right. Came over here, did the same thing, connected these lines. All right. Now we have a dart we have to put into our sleeve. Now usually when you see a sleeve pattern, you don't see a dart because we take this dart intake and we move it here so that this can be wider, because we don't have designs that require keeping that elbow dart there. Just remember that the elbow dart is always on the back of the pattern. So the first thing I do to get this dart is to measure from the original here to here, okay, and from here to here. So I measure this and find the halfway point from D all the way out. When I find that halfway point, then I measure out an additional 1/4 inch. Okay, that's where this mark came from. All right. And then once I find that 1/4 inch, then I mark the 1/2 inch between the 1/4 inch mark and this mark here. So that's right here. Okay, so what I ended up doing again was on my elbow line, measuring from the center out, and then adding a 1/4 inch, and then dividing that measurement in half and marking it here for the tip of my dart. Okay, then I measure down from that measurement 1 inch, so I can have myself a 1 inch dart. So I measured from here down here, and that gave me 1 inch, and I connected that to that halfway point. Okay, so now I have my dart. And where this is, now I have to connect this to my bicep line, just like this. Okay, and then I came down here to my wrist, and I came in, measured in at the wrist 3/4. So from where my original mark was, I came in 3/4 inch. That put me here. Okay. And then I measured down from that point. Okay, my new point here. I measured down another 3/4 of an inch. Okay, and so now I have a new line that goes up to that dart leg, right? So what we're doing when we do this is shaping our the bottom of our sleeve. So here's my new sleeve. It started out there, now it's here. Now I'm going to take this and put it right at that line and connect it over here to my the other side of my pattern. And our wrist line now is diagonal like this, which is more realistic. All right, and then I'm going to connect these lines, draw them in so you can really see them rather. Okay. All right. Okay, so with that, the sleeve is almost done, except for when you have a front and back sleeve and a front and back armhole. The way you know the difference, if you don't see the words on here, you have the fabric cut out and you don't you're looking to find out is that there's 2 notches in the back armhole and 2 notches in the back sleeve, 1 notch in the front and 1 notch in the armhole on the bodice. Okay, the way you find out where to put it is to measure here, and you can use this ruler and do it. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and that's 9 inches. And so half of 9, because we're going to divide that by 3, right? So we're trying to divide that measurement by 3. So if it's 9, we're going to come here, fold our tape at 9, half of 9, and then we want to find out what a third is, so we're going to fold it one more time. Okay, and now we've got the bottom third here. That's the bottom third. Okay, and the bottom third puts us right here. Okay, so that's where my notch would be. The first notch would be here, and then this is the back of the sleeve, so I have to have 2 notches, so a ½ inch away from that one I'm going to put my other notch. Okay, and when I cut this out, I'll use my notcher to find it. And then here, same thing, I'm going to go to the bottom third and put my 1 notch here. Okay, all right, so now I have my sleeve done. Remember when we draft the foundation pieces, we don't add seam allowance to them. Okay, we just draft them and we use these to make other patterns from, and then we add the seam allowance to the finished pattern. So that's the sleeve pattern there. Pretty easy. The most of the time when we're trying to get this shape here is where the issues come in, but this is one simple way to do it. You'll see people do it a lot of different ways here. Sometimes you measure out a ½ inch and you do different measurements around here, but the goal is always to get this shape and also make sure that you have the right difference between these 2 sides here, because that same difference matches up with your armhole in your front and back bodice. One last thing is that this has ease added into it, right? So if you want to know where, like, this is not the center of your sleeve here, that's just really our grain line. So if you want to find out how much ease is in your sleeve cap from your draft, then you can measure out where your armhole. So my back armhole was at 8 1/4. So that would put my back armhole right there. My front armhole, if I measure all the way up here, okay, I'm just starting right here, it was a little bit shorter, so it was 8, so it would be here. Okay, so now this is when I say my armhole, I mean the armhole in my back bodice. That's how long it was, and the armhole in my front bodice, that's how long it was. So we got this excess in here, that is your ease, right? So what you do is measure that and find out how much ease you have. I have 1 1/4 inch, right? So I'm going to fold that 1.25 inches on here. I'm going to fold that my tape in half here. And then once I do that, I'm going to mark where the actual center is of my pattern. So if I have that there, then that means this is actually the center, my center right here. Okay? So this will be my grain line. This, I divided my ease in half, and that gave me my center, like where my shoulder tip would actually be. Okay? Once that ease is added and eased into the sleeve. Okay? And I've got my notches, and so everything is done. Now I'm going to leave the dart in here, but ordinarily what we would do is cut this out, close this dart, and add it down here. So we would use the slash and spread method. I know I'm not going to be making anything where I keep this dart intake in here. So when I cut my pattern out, I'll slash up to this point and slash up to this point, close my dart, and it would open up down here. So it would make my wrist area about 1 inch wider. Okay? And that would be fine with me to move that dart intake there so that I don't have the elbow dart. So the important thing to remember about darts is you don't get rid of them. You can move them around, you can make them into pleats, you can make them into ruffles, you can make them bigger, but you cannot get rid of that if you want a garment to fit you and you're using a woven fabric that does not stretch. All right? I hope these are simple and they really do get you started on pattern making. I will see you in a bit where I will do the front and back skirt, and then as a bonus I will show you a basic way to make pants from the skirt pattern. Thank you so much. I welcome any feedback, any questions about the classes I teach on this, and I will be glad to help you. FVO Fashion Source. Professor Jones signing off. Thank you.